Future people, it's Monday. It's October 28th, 2024, which means I think this is the Halloween edition. We're not particularly spooky, but I'll put up my hood. It makes it spookier. And okay, we got demos. Let's start with Paul. Paul, take it away.
Well, Paul has been authoring this weekend. One of the things he authored was Azure. So the start of the Azure assets. And this came from somebody in the community asked, was there a template that they could follow to be able to do it? So I spent a little time like building some Azure stuff, and it works out not too bad. It's a little slow just because the Azure CLI itself is slow, but we have credentials, and the credential is effectively checking our authentication, making sure that you can actually log into the account. So that's pretty cool. And then Azure's kind of strange in the fact that everything has to have a resource group, and what you actually like the items in a resource group can all have different locations. So a resource group is not limited to an individual location. So, but like one of the things I did is I introduced this idea of being able to create the location so that you can bring it up. And it does make an API call, like to check and validate that your account has access to the location. And then, of course, we can hook that into the resource group, and we can call it Paul creates resource group. And then let's add environment test. And we should get passing qualifications here. You can see like the API is a wee bit slow for Azure. So I don't really like, that's fine. That's one of those things. But we do have all of the ability to not only create, but you can update the tags. You can actually run an import of the Azure resource group because all of the details are there. So we're starting to be able to build these out as a template that people can use. And you can see immediately it created, and now it's doing the refresh. Then we go back to resource. It should appear. Be nice to me. There we go. There we go. We have our resource group. Its provision state is succeeded. But I wasn't like happy enough with that. So what I started to do was I got bored with the Azure CLI because it was a wee bit slow. So while I was waiting on that, I started creating some of the EKS stuff. And the EKS stuff is actually a wee bit more interesting for us because this is one that I've created, and it's called Paul's Test Cluster. But if I drag in a new EKS cluster, and if I push it in here, Paul's EKS cluster, I think is what I called this one. Oh, Paul's Test Cluster. So we're actually able to run qualifications, not only to figure out if you can create it based on the names, because EKS clusters are unique per region in an account. So we can actually check to see if there's a specific name in place, in this case, US East 1. And then I can like check Kubernetes versions as well. So if I like say version 119, then it's going to go off and it's going to like do the check against the Kubernetes version to make sure that it's actually able to figure out the right version. And you can see this one doesn't actually pass the correct version. It brings back and tells us what versions are available to support. And so these types of live qualifications are super useful for us. That's it.
Dig it. Way to have an
Awesome.
authoring palooza. All right, Wendy, hit it.
All right, so I'm going to be showing off the new audit logs page that is very close to having real data in it, but currently in what I'll be demonstrating does not. So here's what it looks like. It's a third tab in our tabs up here. Um, we have all these different things that you can see about each event. These are fake events, obviously. And each column, except for IP address, can be filtered. So I can say, hey, show me only events for a particular actor or for multiple particulars. Same thing for event kinds. Create, right? Maybe I want create and delete. Apparently it's only create right now. Fix that.
It doesn't generate deletes. If you did create and ran
I see.
action, it'll show those too.
The generated don't have delete apparently.
Yeah.
There, perfect. It filters by the current change set by default. I think in this workspace, I don't have any other change sets, but you can filter by no change set if you want to see everything, or you can filter by multiple change sets. You can sort by timestamp in either direction. And now there's also the feature where you can expand rows to see the JSON data for each event. Most of this data is reproduced in the table, but a few bits aren't. And also it's nice to see it as JSON format. There's also some helpful tooltips. For timestamps, we have the long sort of raw timestamp form in the tooltip. And for change sets, we get the change set ID in the tooltip.
Can you filter on timestamp?
That you can sort by timestamp. Filtering would be like kind of the next step for timestamps, is you could set like a range.
In a date and time range.
Do we think
currently
we'll
you
need
just
like a
sort.
multiple filter, like on this day for this type of
Yeah.
change set, for this type of
It's
action?
likely that
Yeah.
that's
I would
something
say
that
the
people
next
want.
turn of this would have that for timestamps, that we would have like you know, filtering by a particular range of time. And then the other thing we didn't implement is filtering for a particular IP address. Both of those are things that require new UI elements that would take longer to make. So try to focus on the stuff that can get done fast.
Is this exportable?
Will be.
It will be.
No.
Needs to be.
It's not.
It is not in the opportunity we plan though,
Yeah.
to be explicit.
Yeah, this is definitely a feature where we're trying to get the bare bones version in the product as soon as possible, and then we'll be iterating on improvements. I think exporting is probably the highest priority improvement, considering that most people want to view these logs outside of our product. But improving our UI is also worth doing so that people don't have to go outside the product.
Have we identified any users we want to show that to?
Yes.
Great. I mean, because we have a bunch of people that have asked about this. I'm wondering if we, like we know.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, Kaiser, you're up.
All righty. Let's share out screen. Yeah, so what I have been spiking on is getting making new resources. We've been doing, or making new assets. We've been doing kind of bespoke up to this point, and like very artisan, kind of like lots and lots of thought, which is really good for filling out the initial few assets that you want, and it's really good for making the good ones. But it takes a while to get started, and it's there's a lot of things that are kind of hard about it, like translating, figuring out what validations look like, and going through and translating every single field when the ones that you really care about are usually like the 40 or 50%, but then 90% of people care about a different other 10% of the attributes in an AWS asset. So making something that would give you a nice start on an asset without you having to go through the AWS docs manually, we think would make it so we can get quality coverage a lot faster, make it so that you can make an asset, get it started, look at it, figure out what you need to change. And so we decided to see what would happen if we used ChatGPT for it. So I made a little AI button here. Adam had done a spike with like playing with prompts to get it to work, and this is like 99.9% his prompts. So when you click on this, what it'll do is let you enter an AWS command and subcommand. And when you hit enter, there's some UI work like progress bar that needs to happen. It takes like 9 or 10 seconds right now to get the response. But once it does, I can see in the background it fetching the stuff it needs. It goes and generates an asset that contains, you can see the queue name. It has a list of attributes like the delay seconds and stuff. And you can see it's actually like generating joy validations for these fields. We're not having it yet do like, bindings and actions and things like that are things that we think are probably good, but we wanted to spike through and see how this felt before we went like all the way down the road. And so, yeah, this is the basic thing. There's no progress bar right now, and it's using my personal OpenAI key, and but once we get those two things done, we'll be able to get it up and start mashing on the prompts and generating, like, get more people looking at the assets and seeing what they look like. Like the way it works is literally it goes to ChatGPT and says, "Hey, you're an expert cloud engineer," and it actually goes and it downloads documentation for SI and downloads the documentation from AWS for the CLI, like directly, literally just slams the HTML in there and tells it that it's HTML and it figures out, and then says, go create the asset function that generates the schema. So it's literally just, it's reading this web page here. You can see the queue name and the attributes that it was looking at, delay seconds, and it figured out things like the joy validation for maximum message size by reading this thing. So yeah.
Sweet. I look forward to our new AI overlords.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job.
Yeah.
It does a better job than the generator does today, which is pretty great. Okay. Any last minute additions, walk-ons? 3, 2, 1. All right. Happy Halloween. We'll see you all on the other side.